I'm Penny Souster, Tim's widow.
Kirsten Powell. I married him.
Andrew Powell. I married her.
From Sunnyfold House, I'm Bede Williams.
Hi, from Stirling, I'm Tony George.
So, Penny, your husband, Tim Souster, was into electronic music really early. Now, how did it all start? Was it primitive back then in the beginnings?
I would say it was fairly primitive, actually, yes. I was trying to think of the first things Tim used to do. And I remember very distinctly, he was very proud of having bought a table harp. He picked it up, in one of these street sales or something. And he used to play it with something called a contact microphone. Okay, so that produced all sorts of wonderful sounds, and that's probably the first bit of electronic sound I heard come out of Tim. But he then went on to experiment with all kinds of things.
And have you got any of his old gear lying around still? Old ring modulators and things?
Yes, exactly. I did actually find in the studio this little cardboard box, and luckily somebody identified it for me because I wouldn't have known what was inside it. And it's actually a ring modulator that was made for Tim by Hugh Davis, probably in about 1968. And it was delivered to him at the BBC, which is where Tim had been working. And it came in the box looking like this.
You've still got it.
Microphone mixer box. Yeah. And this was what was inside the box.
And that's it then.
That is a ring modulator.
Wow.
And it is, of course, what they used on Doctor Who.
Yeah.
It's the sound of the Dalek. Did you go to the concerts that Intermodulation gave?
Not the ones in the Albert Hall and so on, but I remember going up to the top of the Gibbs building where the rehearsals happened, and we played Terry Riley's In C and all of that sort of thing. And is that all where it started happening for you too, Andrew? Or had you got into electroacoustic music before this?
First piece I ever wrote was when I was still at school in the sixth form. I wrote a piece of electronic music using a sine wave generator, a couple of cymbals with bows, to accompany a film made by our physics master about gamma ray absorption. All the exciting. But the intermodulation thing was really exciting at the time.
Yeah. And
it was actually quite difficult what we were trying to do it with the equipment available then.
The first concert, before they given themselves the name, or you'd given yourselves the name, was in London, I think. And they used the sound equipment belonging to the Who.
Oh, the City of London Festival.
I must say you rather than they, yes. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yes, I do. We were playing in a geodesic dome outside the Tower of London.
Yes.
And our mixing engineer was Pete Townsend.
So was the electroacoustic classical music and electroacoustic contemporary popular music almost one and the same thing then, or was there a divergence between them?
I suppose the groups like early Pink Floyd and Soft Machine were doing some of that kind of stuff. Slightly different. I mean, I know you would often see Richard Wright or Nick Mason at Stockhausen's concerts at the Festival Hall, for example. Point of contact. I mean, obviously, what they were doing was fundamentally tonal, which a lot of what we were doing with Stockhausen most definitely wasn't.
Yes, yeah.
Although that's come back in. I mean, there are areas of, particularly with the sort of spectralism movement, based on harmonic series, which is plasmogeny, is in fact.
I'll just move on to Bede now, because live electronic music enjoyed a huge vogue at that time, the 70s and the 80s. And do you think it'll ever come back, or has its time come again?
Well, maybe if it was for a while out of favor, which I'm not sure it was, it certainly now I think is more as important as it ever was. some of the things which I've been most interested in my explorations is the work that I've been doing with Alistair MacDonald, who's and all the other electroacoustic composers who are now not using hardware but using software. I've done a lot of work with Andrew Knight-Hill from the University of Greenwich recently, and it seems to me that a lot of the most exciting things now are really maintain the same principles as they would have done in the 70s and 80s, and that you have to have something really, really interesting in the original sound source. So you cannot compensate in electroacoustic music with the electronics if you don't have something which is exciting to begin with. And some things I've been doing recently have really amazed me with the fidelity of sound. I thought that we had reached the end of how well we could capture qualities of sound, but there's all things like ambisonics and third order abnisonics in which you're recording in 360 degrees, and the possibilities are still expanding, I think.
To Tony now, and can I ask you if Tim had a wicked sense of humour or an elevated sense of beauty in writing this piece, particularly for tuba?
I think it's almost both, because like tuba players, because the tuba wasn't invented until 1835, we've always been looking for new repertoire. And of course, when you have such amazing composers like Tim around, it was not surprising that Melvin sought him out to write something for him. And the beauty of having a pre-recorded section of tubas is just marvelous. It makes it so easy to play around.
Kirsten, you used to work with Tim Souster at Angel Studios in London, and how did you find him there?
He was amazing to work with. His ideas were just phenomenal. He was very, very clever man, and I really enjoyed his music. He brought in some amazing pieces of equipment. I do remember the Surge he brought in, this amazing piece of equipment which had huge plugs, like a telephone socket that you plugged in each different sound. It was a beast of a thing. He once brought in some people he met, I think he met them busking, and he met a person who used a ski, which he had put a hinge in, and then put strings on, and then used a bow, and he used to busk on the tube with this strung ski. So he loved new and different things. Yeah. It was always interesting with him.
And Penny, how did Tim get on with Stockhausen? I mean, you spent some time living in Germany, and then you went to the States.
It was an interesting time. He used to come in sometimes after concerts in Cologne. He would come to the house, and Doris would give him some supper. And he used to come up and visit us upstairs. We had this little flatlet. And he was talking, at that time they were going to redo the concert hall in Cologne, I think. I've got very good memory on this. But he would sort of draw diagrams of how he thought things should be. So he covered the paper with lots of bits of felt tip pen and stuff. And then he signed it and gave it to Rebecca, age 2, to keep for posterity. So it was a bit like that. It was very interesting though. I mean, obviously, having conversations with someone like him was fairly extraordinary. The time in America was completely different. Tim had a traveling scholarship for a year, 78 to 79, starting out on the West Coast, and then he had some time on his own, and then we joined him. We traveled all the way across, and the last year was in New York. It was exciting time.
Well, I remember the Contemporary Music Network tour. We had a huge Pantechnicon full of gear, and then a smaller van as well with some of the sound equipment in it, and you could practically do it on a couple of suitcases now. If that, the same sort of thing. Tony, tell us what it's like rocking through heavy reductions. Then, do you go into a sort of trance halfway through with all of this E flat going through your body?
I wish it was like that. Most of the time, I was worried about trying to make sure that I left enough gap to put all the speaking in. The final performance, I did a voiceover for, which was John's suggestion, which works really well. But the actual concert performance, I was speaking at the same time, and it's very difficult to take the tube off your face, speak, and then come in and play something ridiculous and high and fast with lip trills, and then take the tube off your face and do it again. But yeah, it's just the most amazing piece, and it's performed virtually never, which is a complete travesty. It needs to be played a lot more.
Penny, what do you think Tim would think of all of this palaver doing his music?
Oh.
And
Well, he'd be absolutely amazed at the technology now. I mean, I'm so sad he's missed it all, because for one thing, talking about all those pantechnicons that took the gear around, he would have loved the fact that he only had two bags or something with the stuff in. But just the scope of everything he would have loved now.